there, how you doing? This is a video in response to an article that was on a health website. I'm not going to name it. And it gave you ideas as to stretches that you could do for the hip flexors, and sort of touted these stretches as, easy stretches and easy exercises you can do to create good health in the hips. And a lot of these articles are very well-meaning, but they don't offer any videos, for one thing, which is difficult if you are a visual learner. The more you become aware of your body, though, the more you will be able to take text and insert it into your movement, but it's still a little tough. And then secondly, the part that kind of gets me is, although these types of articles are very well-meaning, there isn't a whole lot of room for how do you make sure that you're safe. They always give you at the end, don't push too hard, don't, hurt yourself. But how do you know that you're hurting yourself? Sometimes you're doing things and you don't know what potential damage you could be causing. So I get a little wary when I read these articles, and I really do appreciate having some guidance. So if you need a little bit of guidance, always kind of talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. I'm a yoga instructor, but I've also been involved in body movement since I was a teenager as a gymnast. Also took ballet, and then I coached gymnastics, very competitively, high-level stuff, for a really long time. So that, combined with yoga, allows me to understand the human body. I've also been injured in multiple ways. So one of the things this is trying to address here is a few different ways to do stretches. So I printed out the article, and I'm just going to pick it apart a little bit and give you an idea of how to do these things correctly, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you always want to have some mindfulness of the breath when you're doing a stretch or an exercise. We tend to hold our breath when we're doing things. Anything that moves the body, or where you hold your body, we tend to hold the breath, or at the very least, we're not taking deep breaths. So if you can just remember, for these particular exercises, we're going to inhale down the body. So instead of inhaling and going like this, we're actually going to inhale and fill up belly, ribs, and then the back of your body, right? And then as you exhale, like a little toothpaste tube, it just kind of lifts up the top. And your core, which is going to affect your hip flexors, your hips in general, is really going to start from the tops of your feet, but we'll go over that later. What you're going to use is the bottom, the navel muscle here. And just inhale, and a little squeezing muscles, and you may not be aware of your muscles, but just do the best you can. It will become more obvious as we get moving. So they tell you first a seated butterfly stretch, okay? So I'm going to go to a side view for this, okay? So it says to start, sit on the floor or on a mat with your legs folded in front of you and the soles of your feet touching. Here we go, all right? So this is my butterfly. All right, my knees are very high. I'm not very flexible in this particular region of my body. Part of it is because of the way my bones are formed. And so some of us are never going to get more flexible in some regions unless we can stimulate our bones to change, which can be done because you see how people's spines change as time goes on. And, our leg formation can change based on how we're moving our feet and all that stuff. But if I were to do my stretch from here, I don't know if you notice this, but I need to actually tilt my pelvis back into my body to sit properly. So now I'm not on top of what we call the sit bones. If you want the technical term, it's your ischial tuberosity. The only way for me to get on my sit bones is either to jam my pelvis forward, and now I'm overarching the low back, I feel a little tension here. Or, even better, I would say most people that are going to do this stretch, especially if you don't do a lot of movement and you're not flexible, is to sit on something. A cushion is fine, okay, like a firm cushion. Just use a block or a book, something that's going to get you on your little butt bones down there, okay? So you got your little butt bones, your sit bones, and now I can sit more straight. And you're going to want to be sort of tilting off the end of your, whatever you're sitting on. You don't want to be like square on it. And now most of us are going to be safe. So if you're ever sitting, and you're like this and your pelvis tips backward and your tailbone starts to curl forward, that's a big no-no, okay? And look what happens when your pelvis tilts backwards too. Do you notice what my upper back is doing? It's rounding, okay? You're supposed to have a little roundness in the upper back and the thoracic, but most people do this anyways without even knowing. So it's probably better to try and be straight. Okay, so now that we've got the seat, that took forever. It tells you to bend forward from the hips. Well, I don't like that idea of bending forward from the hips because most people will do this. I like the idea of stretching from the pelvis and the front of my lumbar spine, stretching my lumbar spine out of my pelvis. I like that visual. So this is where the exhale comes in, right? So as you inhale, you might feel more rooted into your block or whatever. Yes, you can wiggle your shoulders like that, that's fine. And then as you exhale, a little squeezing and lifting from the muscles below the navel, and then stretching forward like you're trying to draw your navel towards your toes, okay? And we're going to do this with some movement. We're not just going to jam ourselves into position. We're going to inhale, and then exhale, squeeze and lift, and then draw the navel up the body. And then I'm going to do that until I feel like I'm stretching but not in pain. So instead of bending at the hips, think of lengthening from the front of your spine, the front of your sacrum, the front of your lumbar spine. And then it says to hold your ankles to keep position. But honestly, I don't know if that's always the best thing because people tend to have their shoulders hunched up. So have them relaxed, or maybe even take a block to help give you a little integrity in the upper spine. So you'll see a lot of people stretching like this, and that's what we want to avoid. So we're trying to lengthen, squeezing that little toothpaste tube on the exhale. And then when you inhale, maybe you release a little bit of pressure by breathing all the way down. You may not even be this high, okay? So your pelvic and spinal integrity are paramount. The rest will come in time, all right? So that's number one. Number two, they give you pigeon pose. Now, pigeon is really, in my opinion, in some ways very advanced because there's so many different ways to do it, because the pelvis can be designed in so many different ways. So I'm going to tell you how to do this at least amount of danger possible, okay? So it tells you here, the pigeon pose is one of the most effective stretches, which I do agree with, for opening up the hips, but not so much even opening the hips, but stretching your IT band, which is really just a long line of fascia. It's not so much a muscle. And it'll get into different parts of your hamstrings that you won't get into just by sitting and folding yourself forward. And it does other things too. So anyways, this is what it tells you to do. Begin on all fours. Slowly bring your right knee forward and place it behind your right hand. Position your ankle in front of your left hip. Okie dokie. And then it says your leg should be perpendicular to the rest of your body. So parallel would be like this. Perpendicular would be a total right angle here. All right, somebody is actually going to know what perpendicular means, and they're going to take it very literally. And they're going to force their shin to go perpendicular, which could really screw with your knee, right? So what I do is, when I first started doing pigeon, I couldn't even get close to that. I had to have my leg almost parallel, and I had to be like this, okay? Also, when my knee is in line with my wrist, I feel this kind of catching in my inner thigh. So my knee actually comes outside of my wrist, outside of my hip a little. Everyone's going to be different, so you're going to have to experiment with different ways. And also know that the first way that you try pigeon and feel comfortable is not necessarily going to be the way you're going to stick with if you continue with the stretches, okay? So what I'm going to do is, because I'm a little bit more advanced in the stretching, is I am going to take my shin perpendicular to start, but then I'm going to take the back leg, and then I'm going to release my leg and let it go where it naturally wants to go, okay? For anybody else, I would recommend taking the leg at more of a 30-degree angle and just trying to get your hips square. So when I say square hips, I'm going to show you. So from here, square hips. So a lot of people are going to tend to come over to this side. Now I've got one hip higher than the other. Some people will even do this. You need to have square hips. So it's as though you could balance a teacup, let's say, on maybe your sacral area. So from here, and I'll show you from the side again, use that breath to help you out. Also, use props. There's absolutely nothing wrong with putting props underneath you. A block or a blanket underneath that booty, that front booty. Also, a block, maybe a little thinner than this, or a blanket here. This is going to help you, especially if you're not used to doing stretching like this. Pigeon is not just something I would throw people into from verbal instructions, unless they were pretty familiar with their body or yoga or dance or something like that. Okay, so here we are. Let's use the breath. Again, you can use all the props you want. The idea is to not put a lot of stress on your upper body. So I always tell people to Stonehenge a block and having support under the front sit bone first, okay? And then from here, you want to relax the upper body. Now when you inhale into the right side of your body, like you're filling up space in your right butt cheek. And then from there, when you exhale, pretend like you're drawing your left leg, in this case the back leg, the left leg, back into the hip socket a little. So you're activating your inner thigh. And then I continue to do that. I inhale, I sit my right seat back a little. And then I exhale and I draw the back leg into the hip socket using a little bit of the pelvic muscles. And I just do that a few times. You don't do it the whole time. And then I'll come down to where I'm comfortable. And then every now and again, I use that breath as little checks and balances to make sure I'm not uneven. And I'll inhale, sit back a little, taking the sit bone back, exhale, drawing essentially the sit bone in as your leg comes back into the socket. All right, it's important that you know that this position can be really uncomfortable. So stay there as long as you can. If it's painful, come out. If it's just uncomfortable, try to find a good count and a good way for you to stay in position. Focusing on the breath is the best way to do it. When you come to the other side, know that it is likely both sides of your body are uneven. So treat your body as such. Don't try to make both sides of your body the same by forcing it, okay? Your body's very important, and it's very different on both sides, most of us. So you got to really treat it exactly the way it needs to be treated. So left side could be different. And also remember that there can be compression in the spine here if you're sitting way up. So this is where some of that lifting, having something under here can help, having something under the front hip, okay? And then on top of that, try to get it off of your wrists, okay? You don't want to be supporting yourself on your hands the whole time. All right, so now we've got weighted hip extension. I don't even understand the point of using the weights here. It really doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference. I wouldn't recommend weights, especially for something like this. So in yoga, we call this Dvipadapitham. If you hold it in position, it's Setubandhasana. It's just a bridge. So I'm going to address both, all right? All right, so if you have a weight on here and you don't know how to move your body from the front, you're going to probably default into your low back, and you're just going to arch your back, and that's all you're going to do, okay? That's not what it is. That's what they're kind of describing here. Let's see, they say, this stretch works to strengthen glutes and lengthen the hip flexors. Yes, it can work as a good hip flexor stretch for sure. Lie on your back and bend your knees, keeping the soles of your feet flat on the floor. But how wide should your feet be? They should be about hips width distance. If you're having trouble with balance, they could be a little wider. And then here's the other thing. Toes should probably turn in slightly. If you don't like them turning in, just have them straight ahead. Do not turn them out, because now we're starting to tighten up low back area, SI joint. We don't want to really do that. So turn the toes in slightly, slight pigeon toes, or just completely parallel. That's important. And then it says, place a comfortable weight on the lower part of your abdomen. I have no idea why, especially if you're working from a position of weakness, and most people are. So that doesn't make any sense to me. You can do that later, as you notice how to do it correctly. Then it says, raise your butt. It's not about raising your butt, because now you're just going to arch your low back. That's all you're going to do. and lower back off the floor while keeping your feet, upper back, and head on the ground. Okay, repeat 10 times. Sure, 10 is a good arbitrary number, but don't think of it as raising your butt. So let's think about it this way. Let's take it from a different angle. All right, so your points of contact with the earth, even when you lift your hips up eventually, is going to be the back of your shoulder blades and the feet. So lift and spread your toes, just like that, and really feel like the ball of your big toe, little toe, and heel, and really press it down. You can release your toes. Now press your feet down strongly, and then what you want to do is you want to activate your hamstrings and your inner thighs. So draw your inner thighs energetically, like with your muscular action, towards your pelvis. So take an inhale, press your feet and shoulder blades into the ground. When you exhale, squeeze the inner thighs up the legs, and then lifting from the muscles of your pelvic floor, and then do that little toothpaste tube action up the front sides of your spine and all the way up here. So you're just hamstring, feet, and deep core muscles. Inhale when you get there. And then as you exhale, same thing. Draw the inner thighs in and up, lifting up the low belly muscles to protect yourself. This is important. And then drop down. Inhale. Kind of open up a little bit, and then as you exhale, you contain your energy, contain your control of your body. This is a lot different than just raising your butt. And you can do this in multiple ways, but right now just work on inhaling, pressing your feet and shoulders, back of your skull, not your neck. And then exhale, inner thighs up and through the front of your body, creating a little cave up here by the ribs. Inhale, maybe release a little bit in the glutes, and then exhale, take it down. So that's going to be a lot better than lifting your butt, okay? All right, so we talked about how the core, your deep core, which is important, starts from the top of your feet, and it comes up the back of the shins and the knees, and then the inner thighs, and then the psoas muscle. If you don't know what the psoas muscle is, I didn't know either until I did yoga. They don't even talk about the psoas in gymnastics ever, but it's really important. So what it is it's the only muscle that connects your legs to your body. That's it, legs to body. It's these two muscles, I call them suspenders, and it starts in the inner thigh bone and then comes up through the front of the pelvis and snakes its way back into our guts and muscle and all that stuff, and then attaches to the side of your low spine and a little bit into the thoracic spine, just like one spot. Anyways, it's really important because it helps lift and draw the pelvis into the body. It's considered a hip flexor, but there's not a whole lot of information. It could do a lot of other things too. There's a lot of information on it, but I think most people that are really into anatomy agree that they don't know everything that it does, right? So that's where part of this lifting the inner thighs into the body. So you're like, what do you mean? What's my psoas? You know, everybody knows they're six-pack muscles, right? But here we go. So come onto all fours and then point your toes. This is important. Now what you're going to do is press them to your fingers more strongly than your wrists, so you're not hanging out in your wrists, right? Press them to your fingers. All right. So just breathe normally. Don't worry about breath right now. And then press the tops of your feet and your toenails into the ground really strongly. Press the tops of your feet into the ground. You should feel muscles start to fire up on either side of your navel. You may not, okay? Because maybe you can't press that hard right now. But continue to do that. Inhale, press tops of your feet. Maybe even work on lifting a little bit here on the exhale. Those are the little psoas muscles. You're going to feel them, okay? 99% of people I tell to do that feel it. Some don't, because we're not in tune with it, but it's okay. It's a process, right? So when we're doing these bridges, you're thinking about that suspender muscle, that psoas. So it tells you to do a bridge and hold, right? So I'm going to lift through the front of the spine. Take a supported bridge. That's a really good way to release these muscles here. So you may not know about your psoas muscle, but a lot of people are hyper tight or hypertonic in that area because these are muscles that are kind of running through your organs, and in particular past the kidneys and adrenals and bladder, and those are areas where we tend to get tight and we tend to hold on, when we get afraid or scared, we tend to tighten up down here. So this is a good way to release it. The block doesn't have to be this high, by the way. I apologize for putting it at its top height. You could always have it lower, and it should be in the sacrum, okay? The lumbar is up here. It's the curvy part of your spine. It's meant for movement. Your sacrum, down here, okay? And just allow yourself to press down. You can get something weighted, like a little sandbag, to press into the pelvis so you can actually release. Try to release all control of your body here, because the tendency is to want to unconsciously lift no matter what, and you're just trying to let everything support you. You could be like this for 10 minutes, and it might feel pretty awesome. All right, so we're going to lift with the feet, inner thighs, hamstrings, low belly. Take it off, and I'm going to take a little ninja roll up. All right, so I do agree with the water exercises. It's great for not compressing the joints. Okay, obviously I can't demonstrate water exercises because I'm a land animal, at least physically I am. Walking is important. Mix up your terrains though. Don't stay on concrete the whole time. And if you can walk on sand, you got to be careful though. Walking on sand definitely requires a lot more strength in our legs for sure, because when we walk into sand, we sink, so we don't get a ground force reaction, so it doesn't target, it doesn't fire up the proprioceptors in our feet, which help us know where we are in space so we can balance correctly. And because you can't like lock your legs out, and you have to use your feet, and you have to keep your legs bent when you're walking in sand, it works way more muscles. For sure. So that's good. If you have unstable ankles, I'd say be careful. Walk on the hard sand first. Not everybody has access to sand either, right? So now there's some seated hip external rotator. I looked at this. I didn't quite like the exercise very much because I feel the way it's worded and the way I tried it that you could possibly torque your knee. You gotta remember that your knee is a hinge joint. So when you're doing a lot of external rotation, you got to be careful. You got to lift it and then come out to the side. So I'm going to show you something that may work for you. I call it the fire hydrant. You can do this with your hands up against a wall, okay, with your legs bent. Don't lock your knees out. You can do it with your on all fours, or you can do it with a little, I call it the happy medium. Maybe your hands are quite literally in your couch. If your knees hurt, always put some padding underneath. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to inhale, press into your wall, couch, whatever it is, and press into your toes and your knees and your shins. And then as you exhale, lift your low belly. Now you remember your legs are attached somewhere back here. So try to let the low belly lift to right about behind the navel, and then lift your left leg up. Breathe in. And as you exhale and you're squeezing and stabilizing your spine, you can lift leg up here. You can flex your foot. You can stay here for a little bit, inhale. Or you can continue to exhale and move. Or you can stay in one spot and just breathe there. You can also come down anytime. Just do it carefully. Do it mindfully. Don't just drop your leg down. And of course you do it on the other side, right? So we use the exhale to move because we're engaging things, right? Saving the pelvis. If you just go ahead and lift your leg up, you don't have any mindfulness of what's going on in your body, yeah, I guess that could work too, but chances are you're going to end up tweaking something at some point. All right, and then the other one, they do standing hip flexor. I don't particularly care for that, plus it requires an exercise band. Why do you need to get one of those? I do like resistance work, though. I do promote it quite a bit. For this, all you need is, you don't even need blocks. You could do soup cans, tomato paste sauce cans, or books, whatever. I think crescent lunge is really one of the best and most simplest ways to stretch hip flexors and hamstrings. So right now, I'm stretching this hamstring, I'm stretching this quad and hip flexor, and even the psoas, right? So that's cool. That's good. That's a lot that we're doing. But you just want to hang out your hips. If I hang out on my hips, I can go way forward. But now I'm not feeling quite a muscular stretch, right? And again, this is something you may not be aware of yet in your body. So here we go. We're going to do, this is a strengthener and a stretcher at the same time. This is my favorite. You can do everything all at once. It's very efficient. And also because you're doing a little strength with resistance and a little stretching with release, you're doing the resist-release technique for stretching, which is something we've been using in gymnastics for a really long time. It's more effective than just sitting in a position for a long period of time, with certain things. There's nothing wrong with staying in a position for a long time either. But you got to do multiple things, right? You can't just stick with the same method. So inhale, press your back toes, back shins, knees, and your front foot. I'm even lifting and spreading here. And then when I exhale, I'm going to try and, again, scissor my legs together like they're going to slide together. Now this leg is active. And I'm going to draw the inner thigh up, little psoas action here. And then inhale at the top. When I inhale, I'm going to sink a little bit, press down into the earth, and when I exhale, I'm going to scissor and lift. So I'm getting a stretch, I'm getting strong, and I'm doing it all without any really high impact anything. Now here's the thing, when your knee goes in front of your ankle, it's okay if it goes over a little bit, but what you don't want to see is this, because now the knee has a lot more room to move, which you don't want. You don't want that instability, not in the knee. And then same thing with your back leg. Try and get your knee behind your hip, but if you don't have that flexibility, it's fine. Just know that everything is something to work towards. And then when you want to come out, I'd use the exhale, scissor the legs. See what happens when I scissor the legs? Scissor the legs, lift through the front of your psoas, and then come back, and then stick your bum out just a little bit. We're just neutralizing the pelvis instead of sticking it into place. And then come down forward for a stretch. Your choice. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to. If you do stretch your hamstring though, which is a good idea because we just activated it, feel the stretch here, the belly of the muscle. If the backs of the knees are too intense, you don't want that, and you don't want the attachment points, which is pretty much like right to almost near the sit-bones, okay? So you don't want that. All right, and you can do that on the other side too. So just to see, everybody's got a difference between the two sides. Inhale, press your whole back leg, toes, front foot, and when you exhale, scissoring together and lifting through the front of the pelvis. Maybe you come off the blocks, right? This is also a balance exercise. Okay, the last thing I'm going to have you do is if you really want to help your hips out, you want to stretch out your piriformis for sure. Spinal twists are the best. And I suffered from sciatic pain for a really, really long time, and it was on and off, and I hated it. Anyways, I did heal myself through a certain style of yoga, which I'm not going to get into, but one of the things that always felt good was a spinal twist. Forward bends for sciatic pain, not so good. But the spinal twist is. So real quick here, we're going to twist our legs to the left, which means we want to move our hips to the right a few inches. Take your knees together, that's one way, loosely organized or together. Also, my hips are still to the right. Cross the right leg over the left and then twist to the left. That's another way of doing it. You want to tack your opposite shoulder blade. So my knees are to the left, my right shoulder blade. I want to tack that to the floor. Now if it won't go to the floor because that much mobility is missing, you have a couple of options, right? Take your block and support your leg so you can get the chest square. The chest still doesn't go square. It's not a bad idea to tuck a little blanket or something underneath that shoulder. I've also done something where the knee was up, and then I took a blanket under the same shoulder and lifted that up, and that helped tack the other shoulder down. It all depends on what you need, right? And if it doesn't feel good, obviously don't do it. And I use a blanket. I wouldn't use a block under there. And then when you when you want to come back, remember your legs are heavy, so use that little bit of core engagement. Bring them back. Do whatever you need to do, right? And then take your hips to the left, cross, keep them together. There's different benefits to every twist. The important thing to remember is once your legs are down, try not to clench them together. Try to keep a looseness back here, right? And then just try and get the opposite shoulder blade back. And you can look the opposite way of your knees or not. And that's pretty much it. Now, you could, of course, do everything much longer. This video is going to end up being a half an hour, so you could definitely keep the poses going longer, make this into a whole hour-long routine, or you could just do it real quick. pick and choose what you need most, what helped you most. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the descriptions. Feel free to subscribe, like, ask questions, whatever you need, and have a great stretch.